And it's a great pleasure today to welcome and introduce Dame Ellen MacArthur. And we've got a number of questions and discussion points that Ellen's going to help us with today. So I'm going to kick off with the first question to you, Ellen. Now, it might be difficult to believe, but there may be some people out there who've never heard of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So could you just give us a little sense of the work of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation over the past 10 years, some of the progress that you've made and some of the highlights?
Thanks, Peter. So the foundation's been in existence for just over 10 years, and it's been the most phenomenal journey. Our goal is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And 10 years ago, we began by saying we would work in the areas of education, business, and looking at working with governments, because we realized that in order to transition to a circular economy, the only way you can do that is if you change the system. So you can't just do that with business. You can't just do that with education, and you can't just do that with policy through working with government. And I think that's a real key here, especially around the activities of the NICER program. Collaboration has to be right at the forefront. So 10 years ago, we launched with that focus. We were a very small team of people. We're now a team of over 180 people based all over the world. We have programs which run in education. We work with higher education institutes all over the world. We work with businesses, and we have what we call systemic initiatives, where we actually take a global material flow and we switch it from that straight linear line to one which is circular, which is obviously an incredibly complex process. To do that, you work with suppliers, you work with businesses, you work with policy governments to try to make that line shift towards the circle. And it's incredibly complex, but we've learned a lot about how to actually enact systemic change. And again, that comes down to collaboration. You cannot do it without collaboration. You know, the biggest company in the world can't become circular without collaboration. And that's often collaboration with their biggest competitors. And I think that's a really interesting window to enter the circular economy from, because there are some great circular examples, but to do it on your own is almost impossible. So in order to create a circular country like the UK, which is obviously the goal of the NICER program, it really does need to bring everyone together. You need to bring people's heads together, and you need to change the entire system, which involves the entire country and the many different elements of it.
Great. Okay. And I mean, if we just wind forward 10 years from when you first started. So here we are today, as you say, at the launch of the NICER program. And there's a large number of universities, industry partners, and other organizations engaged in the NICER program. And today we hope that many more will join us. So you've given us a bit of an example there of the need for collaboration. Can you perhaps give us a little bit of a flavor of how the academic community engages, and can you give us some idea of the successes? You know, what are the ingredients of success around collaboration?
So I'll give you a non-academic example first, and then I'll go into the academic side. So when we set about looking at the plastic packaging flows globally, we couldn't find the data that looked to the whole of the world. So we set aside a lot of time with McKinsey, and we did a global analysis of where plastic packaging comes from and goes to, and the findings were quite horrific. But we did that in collaboration with many businesses and several governments around the world, and it led into the New Plastics Economy work, and now the Global Commitment, which is a joint commitment with the United Nations Environment Programme. Now, within that, we now have 25%, over 25% of the global plastic packaging industry signed up to that. And there are also many on the ground programs within countries, the pacts around plastic, to actually unravel this on the ground. So this has now become something which universities and research are involved in very heavily, looking for new materials and different business models. There are many companies globally focused on this, working out how they can transition from that linear plastic flow to that circular plastic flow, and what needs to be designed out, both business model wise and material wise. And then you also have the policy space that sits around that. So that's grown from nothing 5 years ago to being a now international pact involving people all over the world. The Global Commitment involving businesses all around the world. Finance institutions are heavily involved. We've taken an idea into something which is truly interdisciplinary and has a massive element of collaboration. Within the higher education space, we've seen something similar. We had several links with universities when we launched, very, very, very early days. Now we've seen enormous growth in universities, taking up the idea of the circular economy, and actually particularly in the UK. You know, within the UK, there have been 12 circular economy centres open in the last 4 years, which is, for us, absolutely outstanding. But it's also interesting to see where that circular economy activity is. When we began, it tended to be around business, engineering and design. Now it's way outside that. It's in the behavioral science space. It's in fashion. It sits within finance. There are so many conversations within that learning and research environment, looking in and digging deeper into circular economy. And part of that is the pull from business, because the skills are required to rethink the system. And part of that is the pull from individuals who are looking for a more resilient economy, something that really works in the long term. So from our perspective, the UK really is at the forefront of circular economy further education activity.
Great. Well, we're going to come on to some of those points in some other questions. I'm going to hand over to Fiona for a couple of questions now.
Great, thanks Peter, and thanks Helen. I think building on your previous answer around how it's really important to engage and inspire lots of different stakeholders across the community, including academics, government, industry and wider society. I think the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has been really successful at doing this, and this is one of the challenges that we'll have to address as the NICER programme. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how you have managed to maintain that kind of crisp messaging and fantastic communication.
I think for me, the top line of all of that is the circular economy is a massive opportunity. It's an economic opportunity. It's a design opportunity. It's an opportunity to build a resilient economy in the long term. It's all about what we can do, not what we can't. So from our perspective, that almost sits at the top. Of course, there's the linear to the circular, the take, make, dispose, which turns into that circular regenerative system. But that in itself is a massive opportunity. And then the second thing would be to be really careful with the messaging. It's so easy, and I've done this many times. You drift off into the management consultant speak that we've used in some of the economic reports, and actually a lot of people can be missed off that understanding of circular economy. Circular economy is it's an approach to the way the global economy works. It's looking at that materials backbone and making those materials cycle. This is a very broad opportunity. This is about rethinking business models just as much as rethinking the materials that fit in the system. It's about the design, it's about the distribution, it's about the value chains, it's everything. And trying to keep that as simple as possible for the audiences that it's intended is actually very challenging, but really, really important. Simple, crisp messaging around circularity.
Brilliant, thank you. And then building on that, there are many different schools of thought and perspectives that are associated with the circular economy, spanning from the view that it's just about waste and recycling, the topic of degrowth, resource efficiency, and then all the way through to that really important systems change, as you mentioned. And I just wondered if you've got any advice for us as we navigate through those differing schools of thought.
I think it's really important to keep looking at the big picture, or if you're looking at the big picture, focus in on something specific within the system. So you're kind of doing the microscope, the macroscope, the microscope, the macroscope. Otherwise, you can kind of lose your way in a bit with circular economy. We found with the plastics as an example that we've worked towards a circular economy for plastics with the new plastics economy work we've been doing now for many years. And it would be very quick to jump to the conclusion, this is about recycling plastic. Of course, the recycling of plastic is absolutely part of a circular economy, but it's about building an economy that runs in the long term. So part of it is distribution models. Part of it is business models that enable people to have access to products, perhaps without plastic at all. Maybe it's a different material that's created to fit within the biosphere, so it regenerates natural capital and helps to rebuild biodiversity loss. There are many different elements that sit within this, and that's why it's so important to keep looking out. It's not just recycling infrastructure that's going to solve this. Yes, we absolutely need that recycling infrastructure, particularly in emerging markets, else we're never going to build that circular economy. There's got to be many other elements, though, that are focused on upstream innovation, the innovation in materials, the innovation in business models, the innovation in design. And we don't have many of these answers. These are new products, new distribution models, new ways to get products to people. So you have to kind of look at the big picture and then hone in on the details and then look back at the big picture. And that example is just plastic packaging. It could be food and farming. It could be the jeans redesign project and keeping fashion within a system through Make Fashion Circular. There are so many different ways you can look at circular economy. You can take one material stream or one sector and hone right in on it, but you have to keep looking back out at the bigger picture and look at how this can be brought forward. And I guess a great example would be when you look at a washing machine as an example. Today we buy a washing machine, we pay tax, we have it in our house, we own all the materials within it. At the end of its life, it's a problem, it's broken, it's a real pain. You generally can't get anyone to fix it. So you end up getting it to the landfill site where you pay tax again through landfill tax. Within a circular economy, of course, you would design a different machine because you design it to be repairable, you design it to be upgradable. When we bought it, we wouldn't buy it. We'd join a contract, so we'd pay per wash. So actually we don't own it, nor do we own the materials within it. So that changes the design of the product, it changes the financing of the product, it changes the business model that gets the product to us, and it changes all the distribution and the movement of these products. So actually, just through redesigning a washing machine, which you could do tomorrow, doesn't solve the problem, because we'd still buy that redesigned washing machine, and when it broke, we probably wouldn't know what to do with it. So you have to change all the elements of the system, and that's where the interdisciplinary nature of circular economy is so, so important.
Great. And I'm going to come with a follow-on question there, Ellen. So, and you focused in on business models and you know, distribution and supply chain. So I'm going to ask you a question about your work with business leaders. So you speak regularly to many of the chief executives and senior executives and managers of many of the world's largest corporates, as well as many other leading organizations. So over the past 10 years, how has that conversation evolved, and what's your view about the work of circular economy in the future and its relevance to business leadership?
I think circular economy is the future of business. You know, we cannot continue to squeeze more profit out of a linear system in the long term. I mean, that's something that cannot be argued with. We have finite resources in a world with a growing world population, so things have to change. And I think everybody initially, when we began those conversations, really did realize that. You know, if you challenge the chief exec to say, where will your business be in 10 years? Where will your business be in 20 years? Actually, a lot didn't have the answers as to what it would look like if it was working as well as it possibly could. And that's what circular economy is you're decoupling economic growth from resource constraints. So you're building a system which is regenerative and restorative. So I would say the early conversations were about challenging the idea of a linear system. And in many ways, it's common sense that linear can't work in the long term. That conversation now has moved on stratospherically. I mean, we were having conversations with individuals. Now we're having conversations with multiple chief execs from some of the biggest competitors in the world on the same call, talking about that systemic change which has to happen to make that sector circular. And that's really important, is they now realize this is not just about what they do within their business. Of course, that's vital. They're building that circular system within to their business's infrastructure, within their supply chains, their value chains. Everything has to change, but they can't do it on their own. Take plastic packaging. You know, Coke can't do it on their own. Pepsi can't do it on their own. There needs to be a common understanding of what that circular economy for plastics looks like, so the infrastructure can follow, so the infrastructure can be put in place to make that system work. And that's really, really interesting. That's become a very different conversation with those most senior people from that where we were challenging the linear model 10 years ago. Now we know the linear model doesn't work in the long term. We understand what circular can look like. It's about what levers we need to pull to put that into practice and linking in the right people to make that happen.
Okay, great. And I'm going to switch now from big to small. So small and medium-sized enterprises. So part of the NICER program, and a large part of your work is working with many different types of organizations, many of them startups, innovation companies, and as I say, small and medium-sized companies. So can you just tell us about the importance of those companies in your work and in the circular economy, and what are some of the ways in which you try to work with those organizations?
Well, right from the beginning, we've had a real thirst for finding circular activity. And sometimes you find that within a huge organization. Actually, most commonly, we were finding it in the small organizations, the SMEs, these small companies that had really different ideas to run things in a different way, with different materials, to look at distribution in a different way, to look at the sourcing of products in a different way. It's been really, really interesting. I mean, over this 10-year journey, there are 6 SMEs that we've identified in the past and had many conversations with, and they've joined our network. They're all valued now at over $1 billion US. So that shows the speed of change of a good idea. And it's not just the SMEs in isolation, but it's the SMEs working with the big corporates. It's often, take a peel, for example, it's a material it's a natural material that covers fruit and vegetables, which keeps it fresh for longer. It's basically a plastic replacement, but it's entirely natural. So you eat it, it's just on the product. Now that's now valued at over $1 billion US. Of course, they can only exist through collaboration. They need to collaborate with the buyers of the products to keep them fresh longer, so the packaging can change. So you need all of these multi-level conversations. That's why those SMEs are so important, because actually for a huge organization, an incumbent, if you like, who's been working in a linear way for many years, their chief exec might have the most circular dreams for that business and the most circular ambitions. It takes time to turn that ship, even with the best decision makers in the right place. When it comes to a SME, they can kick off like that in a circular way with a great idea. It's very challenging, but it's almost easier in a way to start with that clean sheet of paper. And that's what many of them are doing. And that's why it's absolutely essential for them to have the support that they need and for policy to help them where it can.
Yeah. Great. Back to you, Fiona.
Great, thank you. This is a really important year, obviously, with G7 and COP26 just around the corner. I think the evidence in the link between the circular economy and net zero and global climate challenges has never been more urgent. You've published several recent reports on this topic, and I wondered if you could give us a bit of an overview of some of this work.
Thanks, Fiona. Well, I think there's always that jumping to the conclusion that climate change is all about the emissions of electricity generation and moving from A to B. And obviously that's a huge part of the emissions that we emit globally. It's a massive part. When we looked at what we needed to do to keep on the 1.5 degrees trajectory, if you switch to renewable energy, you can get to about half of that. That switch to renewable transportation gets you to about half of that, but half of that, it isn't touched by the renewable energy transportation. What we need to do is we need to look at the other half, and that's how things are made. It's the embodied energy within materials, within products. And we started to look at an analysis of that half. So of this half that switching to renewables doesn't touch, what does that half look like with regards to where the energy sits? And we took 5 key materials. We took steel, aluminium, cement, food, and plastic packaging. And we said, if you could switch the food systems, the packaging systems, if you could switch those to circular, what effect would that have on this remaining half of emissions that we're currently emitting? And if you change just those 5 sectors, it would cut that by half, roughly half. So we're talking about a significant energy saving, emission saving by changing the system. You know, if you remanufacture something, the amount of energy embedded within it is vastly lower than a brand new product. A remanufactured engine, for example, not that combustion engines will be here in 30 years time, but if you take a remanufactured engine, it has 80% less embodied energy with it and 80% less materials. So suddenly there's this massive changing of the energy demand to create that product if you go back to that remanufactured phase, and that's taking a broken engine. If you can use the technology we have today in everything, in our phones, tracking everything, you know, data is not something we lack currently, and put that into the electric engines of the future and the products of the future. And then that feeds back when a part needs changing before it breaks, those savings can be even higher. So there's a massive opportunity in switching to circularity. And indeed, we won't get to net zero unless we do that.
Great, and you mentioned technology as a key enabler, and G7, the G7 event particularly, and also the UK's industrial strategy puts a key focus on green technology, low carbon recovery and future growth. And I just wondered what you thought the role of circular economy has to play in ensuring kind of that transition towards a low carbon recovery, particularly post pandemic.
I think the COVID pandemic has shown us how brittle our supply chains are. There's been a huge amount of fear, a lot of quick thinking, and some phenomenal work done over the last 18 months to find solutions and to keep us, you know, to keep the countries on the road and keep the food flowing, keep the product coming. It's been very challenging right across the world. So I think building a more resilient economy is fundamentally key. And that is exactly what the circular economy is. It's distributed, it's diverse, it's regenerative, it's restorative, and most importantly, it's resilient. So it plays a key role, not only in reaching climate targets, but in building a resilient and regenerative economy for the future that really can run in the long term. It's well worth putting that investment in.
I mean, it's been fantastic to talk to you about some of the work that you've been doing over the last 10 years. And I think certainly the NICER programme wouldn't have the head start that it has without the foundation. I just wondered if you could finish off by thinking about kind of what your plans are for the next 2 and 3 years. What are your priorities? And what would you like to see from the NICER programme over the next 4 years?
Thanks, Fiona. I think the most important objective is to elevate that circular economy conversation across the country from the NICER program's perspective. What we need to do is elevate the conversation. It's make those policy suggestions. It's collaborating in a way that makes those the right suggestions and can really help to steer the economy towards that regenerative, restorative future that we're all hoping for. And I think from the foundation's perspective, we have a network of businesses and organizations right around the world, including here, obviously in the UK, particularly when it comes to higher education. We are in that same space. The conversation needs to be elevated further. There are some amazing case studies. There are some great examples, and there are some superb systemic initiatives that we're working on. Food and Cities, Make Fashion Circular, the New Plastics Economy. There's a massive conversation going on globally now around financing the circular economy and measuring the circular economy. These are all topics we're working on very hard and very fast. But ultimately, it's about elevating that conversation. And I would say we're on exactly the same journey from that point of view. We need to take the conversation to the next level. We need to make this as real as we possibly can. And most importantly, we need to do it as fast as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen, and we really appreciate you joining us on this conversation, and we will continue to continue the conversation with you over the next 4 years, we hope. So thank you very much, and I'm sure everybody out there has really appreciated and valued your ideas, and would appreciate everything you've done over the past 10 years to get us to this point in the journey. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Peter. This is very much a team game, so we look forward to working with you in the coming years. And thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing in this space. It really makes a massive difference.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the Hub and our work programme and a bit about how we're structured, and importantly, how we're intending to engage across the programme. So this diagram is similar to the one that Nick presented, and really gives an overview of the programme as a whole. So I won't go into too much detail on this, but just to really remind everyone of the significance of the programme, and that it's one of the largest UKRI investments into interdisciplinary circular economy research and innovation that there's been. And it's just interesting on the right hand side, one of the roles of the Hub, we've been reading through all of the centre proposals and kind of pulling together some of the commonalities and differences, but just to really reflect on the size and the scale of the programme. So it at the moment involves 34 universities, a number of different academics, over 100 academics, a commitment of over 60 PhD students across the 4-year programme, and over 100 initial industrial partners. But of course, one of the key aims of the programme is to grow that circular economy community through a significant programme of outreach and collaboration. So these figures are just the start, which is super exciting. So looking at the Hub, this is our core team so far, but we're still recruiting. So we have Peter and myself, we have Katie, our CE Hub manager, Emily, our coordinator, and then we've recruited 2 postdocs so far who are both here today, Lucy Chamberlain and Ishmael Morsai. And then we have a number of co-investigators who are leading on specific cross-cutting elements across the programme. So we have Nikki Cunningham, who's our policy lead, Marcus Seals, who's our data lead, and Madeline Smith, who's leading on impact and evaluation. And we're recruiting at the moment a number of additional postdocs and PhD students as well. So really to give you an insight into the vision, I mean, as Nick's mentioned, this has been a long journey, and before the centres were announced and writing their proposals, Peter and I had about a year, or just under a year, to really understand kind of what the circular economy community wanted in terms of needs and requirements. And so we undertook a review of the existing funding landscape, a review of the policy landscape, and also we consulted extensively with stakeholders across the circular economy community, including an extensive industrial survey, to really better understand what the requirements of the community were in order to transition towards a circular economy for the UK and beyond. And some of the key findings from that work have then informed the objectives of the Hub and our work programme. So what we found was there was a real need for clearer guidance on definitions, terms, principles and methods associated with the circular economy. We found that there was a need for inspirational case studies that were underpinned by scientific evidence. So I think we can all agree that circular economy has gained significant interest over the last 5 or 10 years, but actually that activity is quite disjointed and in many cases lacks that academic rigor or scientific evidence to really underpin the transition towards a circular economy. So that's one of the key things that the Hub is trying to provide. And then also we found that there was a real need to empower and mobilise citizens and to enable the co-creation of a circular economy. So to really understand that citizen voice. So as I said, these insights fed into our objectives, which are on the screen here. And then we split those objectives across 4 work streams. And they are really divided across research, fundamental research programme, and then also our outreach and wider engagement activities. So the research programme consists of 4 work streams. In the first work stream, we have committed to develop a dedicated circular economy observatory. And the purpose of this is to create a systemic data and modelling approach for the NICER programme, and to provide the evidence and demonstration of resource productivity to inform industrial and policy commitments and decision making. And I'll say a bit more about that in a second. The second work stream is about the development of a circular economy knowledge platform to consolidate and synthesise both NICER programme outputs, but also those outputs from the wider UK and international knowledge base. So the aim of the knowledge platform is to provide an improved understanding of circular economy principles and practices and to communicate those to different audiences, highlighting the opportunities for collaboration and pathways to implementation. And then the third work stream will facilitate mechanisms of interdisciplinary cross-value chain collaboration and the development of innovative solutions to contribute towards the co-creation of a UK circular economy roadmap. And then finally, the inclusive and capable community work stream really aims to build and coordinate an inclusive circular economy community, both internally within the NICER programme, but then also externally to identify those key stakeholders. And what we really want to do through this work stream is enable and empower collaboration between diverse user groups and disciplines in order to address those long-term circular economy capability and skills gaps and to inform future investment and training opportunities. So just to provide a little bit more knowledge and more information on the observatory. So the aim of the observatory, as I mentioned, is to create a systemic data and modelling approach across the NICER programme that enables data from material flow analysis to be aggregated at different scales to inform ultimately industrial and governmental decision making and national and global strategies within the context of a circular economy. And this will initially involve collaboration between the circular economy centres and the Hub, and also other key stakeholders that we've identified as working in resource flow modelling. And we've already started to do this, so we have developed a data cluster which involves representatives from across the 5 centres and also those other key stakeholders. And we've started to map and evaluate existing activity, data and knowledge, and also to identify where the key gaps are that we're going to need to address. And we're organising a 3-day design sprint in June to really develop the underpinning framework for the observatory. So over the 4 years, we'll work with the centres to identify signature products from each resource flow or centre to really be able to demonstrate the physical flows of materials and opportunities for additional value creation, and also identify those common metrics that are required to track and measure our progress. We'll also develop methods to aggregate that progress and contribution, importantly, towards informing pivotal UK resource-related policy commitments, and also targets to inform wider user needs and support that industrial and government decision-making regarding circular economy agendas. So that, in a nutshell, obviously there's a lot more to it, but that is the overview of the observatory. And then looking at the knowledge platform, really the aim of the knowledge platform is to consolidate and synthesize both the outputs coming from the NICER programme but also to evaluate the knowledge base of circular economy as a whole across the UK. So the knowledge platform will be underpinned by an evaluation framework to measure the real effects and impacts of circular economy tools, approaches and knowledge. And importantly, the knowledge platform will promote a whole system and inclusive approach to circular economy. So facilitating shared learning and open access to a repository of knowledge, tools, methods, case studies, and that underpinning evidence base to inspire, inform and empower the circular economy community. And we've already started work on the knowledge platform by working with the circular economy centres to review, map and critically evaluate existing and emerging knowledge across the academic, policy and industrial landscape. And we're also working towards the development of a common understanding of circular economy principles and practices, at least for the NICER programme as initial starting point. So we hope that the knowledge platform will provide a single point of reference for the circular economy scientific evidence base across the UK. And importantly, it will help us to aggregate the outcomes and impacts of the programme for the UK economy, to look at gaps in future decision making and investment. So they're kind of the two key research streams of the hub. And then we, as I mentioned, have an extensive outreach and engagement strategy to maximise the impact of the programme as a whole. And we've split this engagement strategy into 3 key sections. So first of all, we have activities associated with the NICER programme, stakeholders, all of you on this call today. Secondly, we've termed this wider CE collaborators, experts and end users. And then thirdly, the wider community and society. So just going into a bit more detail on what the hub is intending to do to engage the NICER programme. We have a series of events. Obviously, this is the first event, but we're also holding a national launch in May, which you'll shortly be receiving an invite for if you haven't already. We're then looking to hold a summer school in July and an annual cross-programme symposium. The first one will be in February next year. And an important role of the hub is also to identify those areas of cross-programme challenges or mechanisms that will enable us to collaborate more effectively. So we've already run a webinar and a workshop on impact and evaluation for the programme, and this will be followed by a series of workshops that look at these key cross-cutting elements of the programme. So we're going to be hosting a workshop on metrics and indicators and citizen engagement over the coming few months. We're also keen to work with the centres to develop case studies that can promote the centre as a whole, and we're going to be working towards an end of year 1 report, which really brings the programme together in terms of quantifying the size of the opportunity for the UK based on the resource flows represented by each of the centres. The early career support and training programme is a really important aspect of the hub's work, and as you can see from my earlier slide, there's a significant amount of early career researchers and PhD students involved with the programme. So we've set up an early career researcher working group. A large part of the summer school will be tailored towards providing that initial training and support and opportunities for networking and getting to know each other. And then we're also going to be developing a wider training platform and mentorship programme for those early career researchers and professionals. We've started working on a common programme identity and vision. So as part of that, we want to make sure that we're speaking as one voice across the programme, and we're really promoting it as a programme as opposed to 5 separate centres and a hub. One of the things that we've done early on is the development of a common brand, which you can see through these slides, and we'll also be promoting a number of events and opportunities and recruitment, for example, across the programme. And finally, we've set up a project management and coordination working group, which is really important to help us share best practice across the centres in the hub, and also to develop those common strategies that are going to enable us to really push the boundaries and go a bit further with the programme, as is outlined in our ambition statement. So one of the early things that we're working on, for example, is the development of an equality, diversity and inclusivity policy for the programme. And then just briefly looking at the other two aspects of our engagement strategy, we've set up a number of clusters, which are essentially working groups focused around cross-cutting elements of the programme. So we've already kicked off our first two on data and policy. The hub itself has £500,000 worth of flexible funding built in. So we're going to be launching a call for feasibility studies next month at the national launch. And then we're also going to be running a number of workshops to develop the roadmap that I mentioned earlier. And of course, the Circular Economy Observatory and the Knowledge Platform will provide a key element of that engagement with wider stakeholders, and they will be open access. And then finally, as Nick mentioned, it's really important that we effectively engage with the wider circular economy community and wider society and citizens. So we'll be running a number of events that are targeting different audiences and parts of that community, such as the Circular Economy webinar series. We have a partnership with the Circular Economy Club so that we can promote circular economy stories from different parts of the UK, local, regional and national scale as well. We'll be running a number of community engagement events focusing on different areas of the community, as I mentioned, so SMEs, focusing on those academic disciplines that perhaps aren't already engaged in circular economy and citizens. And then we have Emily has developed us a fantastic communication strategy that looks at obviously social media, newsletters and our website. So I'm conscious that I'm running out of time. This slide really just provides an overview of the management and governance of the hub. So obviously the five centres are represented on our executive management group, and then we report into the UKRI SAG, and we're supported by a number of strategic advisors to make sure we're taking that whole system and interdisciplinary approach. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sharon Borley. I am at the Royal College of Art. I am PI of the Textiles Circularity Centre. For the purposes of brevity, I'll shorten the name to TCC, which is the acronym we normally use, otherwise it becomes a bit of a mouthful. So the Textile Circularity Centre is focused on the resource flow of bio-based waste derived feedstock, that's cellulose from wheat straw, the biological fraction of municipal solid waste, and post-consumer textiles, to propose a circular textiles economy for the UK SME apparel fashion industry, which is going to be underpinned by innovations in materials and product manufacturing, access to circular materials through supply chain design, and consumer experience design. So the TCC is a human-centered design-led undertaking, and hence this is our headline message. We're taking a systems approach that involves processes and stakeholders in the transformation of the resource flow from waste to end user consumption in order to create a coupling between the resource flow and human well-being. And here we mean well-being that is related to social, emotional, economic and environmental factors. So this is our system design that underpins our programme of research, which is comprised of three interconnected research strands: material circularity, circular supply chain, and consumer experience. So in terms of the material circularity research strand, using lab-proven biotechnology, we will transform our resource flow into renewable polymers, fibres, and flexible materials. And we will innovate advanced manufacturing techniques that link biorefining of organic waste with 3D weaving, robotics, additive manufacturing, and circular design to produce textiles for apparel products. And then the supply chain configuration or supply chain design research strand, we will design a transparent supply chain through industrial symbiosis and investigate the technologies that will enable this supply chain. And apparel brands will access this supply chain through our digital biomaterials platform. And then in terms of consumer experience, the focus here is an in-store configurator that we will innovate. and which will deliver novel, effective and creative technologies to engage consumers in digitally immersive experiences and services around the consumption of products that amplify couplings between the resource flow, human well-being and satisfaction. So this is our consortium. We're a highly interdisciplinary team of investigators. So so University of York, University of Manchester, University of Leeds, Cranfield University, University of Cambridge, UCL, and also the RCA. And I've realised we haven't put the RCA logo on. That just shows you how modest we are. And I'll talk about the team in a little bit. We also have a consortium of partners, both from industry, NGO and local government, that span this whole system design, from the sources of waste to biorefining, to spinning, textile manufacturing, additive manufacturing, computer science and information technology, apparel brands and retail. So in our team, so Phil Pennell, who's on this call this morning, is working with me to direct the TCC, and he's a professor of materials and structures at Leeds. Leading the materials circularity research strand is my colleague Miriam Ribble at the RCA, and working with Miriam is Simon McQueen Mason at the University of York in materials biology, and Samir Rahatika at Cranfield in materials and manufacturing, Paolo Bartolo and Prasad Potluri at the University of Manchester, and Alexandra Lanotte, also working with her colleague Simon at the University of York in biology and materials. And then the consumer research strand is led by my colleague Bruna Petrecka, and the research strand leaders will be talking to you in a moment about giving you an overview of the research strand program of research. So she works with me at the RCA, and working with Bruna is Carrie Jewett, background in social science. And then at the UCL, we have a lot of computer science specialists, so Mariana Obrist, UCL, Nadia Bertuz, and also Youngjun Choi. And then Ekaterina Fotopol, who's working in cognitive neuroscience, and one of my colleagues in information experience design at the RCA, Danielle Barrios O'Neill. And then leading the supply chain research strand is Steve Evans at the University of Cambridge, and my colleague Ali Azadipour, who's the academic lead for computer science at the RCA. So I'll now hand over to Miriam Ribble, who will give you an overview of the materials circularity research strand.
The materials circularity research strand will enable the transformations of materials in the circular resource flow to innovate textiles designed for circularity, which will be formed from bio-based waste-derived feedstock. Our challenge is to develop circular recycling, fabrication and design processes that will drastically reduce the environmental impacts of textiles. Existing mechanical recycling processes result in lower grade textile products, and only 1% of textiles is recycled in a closed loop with chemical technologies. But our approach will allow high quality textiles to be produced. We will use pioneering biotechnology to convert waste into building blocks for new sustainable polymers and fiber production, and cutting-edge manufacturing technologies that can be adapted to user needs. We will build on an interdisciplinary approach that integrates biotechnology, material science, textile design, advanced manufacturing, and whole life cycle assessment. Next, thank you. The material circularity research strand will innovate new processes in recycling, textile recycling, and design of use. This will comprise of processes that are new biochemical processes for recycling to enable fully closed loop recycling and reduce of chemicals, new processes for fiber spinning and dyeing that reduce the use of water and chemical dyes, new technologies in 2D and 3D textile manufacturing through the development of complex weaving and non-woven processes, as well as additive manufacturing technologies, which will produce textiles in completely new ways and enable customized on-demand textile production for city-based manufacture, an integration of tech designers in textile circularity to participate in recycling and fabrication, and bringing processes closer to consumers, designers, manufacturers, and retailers for repair and upgrade of materials and maintaining resources in use, as well as whole life cycle assessment will enable us to develop processes that are both circular and sustainable.
Thank you. I'll now hand over to Bruna Petrecka, who will give an overview of the, beg your pardon.
Yeah, just a brief overview of our partners. So Professor Simon McQueen Mason is leading on the bio-based biotech process at the University of York. Then Cranfield University on the fiber spinning, Professor Prasad Batluri and Professor Paolo Bartolo at the University of Manchester on advanced manufacturing, Phil Brunel at Leeds University in the whole life cycle assessment, and the RCA in the textile circularity integration. And we have industry partners in advanced manufacturing, in the waste resource flow, as well as in the biotech processes and the prototyping of textiles. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Miriam. So I'll hand over to Bruna Petrecka, who talk about the consumer experience research strand.
Thank you, Sharon. Good morning. So in a nutshell, the consumer experience research strand will put consumers at the heart of circular economy. And how we'll do this is by designing consumer experiences that engage people in meaningful and sustainable cultures around products, and which transform their role from consumers to active co-creators in sustainable product cycle. And then consumers become a keynote in closing the loops of the circular economy. We know that now we have a gap in ethical consumption between human intention and action, which means that consumers still struggle to navigate and understand how they can contribute. So we are taking a deep dive into human well-being to understand how we can bring people to actively participate in the circular economy. With this, we will offer an alternative to the fast fashion model to create a new culture of consumption that at the same time meets the demand of the market for greater sustainability, but give consumers more agency to respect their environment. Now, this requires a new relationship between consumers and their products, one where we see consumers as custodians, or we can say carriers of materials. So having these new circular bio-based waste-derived materials or textiles at hand, we have a challenge to position them. But our challenge here is emphasized by the fact that not only we want to reduce this acceptance time, we know that in average it takes 20 years for the market uptake, but also we want to make sure that we embed them in a sustainable culture of consumption. So essentially what we are saying is that we want these materials to replace non-sustainable materials soon, but we also want to make sure that they are consumed in more sustainable circular ways. So through what we call a components configurator, we will create new experiences for consumers to explore and select materials and to configure them in products. We can go to the next slide. Yes. So these new interactions for exploration, selection, and configuration of materials in products, they will be supported by innovative technologies that bring awareness, enhance exploration, and enable immersion in material circularity. So hopefully, as I said before, slowing down and closing the loops. With this, we hope to facilitate a change in cultures of consumption and adoption of these new circular materials. And next slide, please. To achieve this, in the consumer experience strand, we cover a wide range of human-centered approaches. So, and we really offer a broad view of humans from the individual through to the social. And our lenses here are mostly through the RCA human-centered design and materials experience, and in UCL, social sciences, human-computer interaction, psychology, and neuroscience. But mostly, I think we want to emphasize how we will work really closely with the industry partners, fashion design brands, retail, and sensing and immersive technologies. And above all, we'll work with consumers.
Thank you, Bruna. I'll now ask Steve. Oops. Now my slides just.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sorry, my slides have frozen. So Steve, please introduce the circular supply chain research strand.
Thanks, Sharon. Before I do that, can I say it's really fabulous to be here. I worked with EPSRC to write the original case to Treasury. We did ask for 60 million, but I think the agenda today would have been too long. So it was good that we only got 30, eh? So you've just heard of some very significant potential technological changes that might happen to the materials that are flowing potentially into the textile and clothing sector. And you've heard of fantastic new ways in which people like us every day will be able to interact with our materials and the technologies around the materials and the retail experience to consume in very different ways. But that is not going to happen automatically. So the third work package is the glue between these two really novel ways of obtaining materials and using materials. We've got to build supply chains that bring those things together. So we're really interested in how the supply chains will change. Will you move to many smaller operators working with farmers, or will farmers move waste to one central distribution center to be processed, for example? So the supply chain stream will develop novel supply chain configurations. We'll do that by modeling material flows, information flows, and value flows. We'll of course be doing that in an inclusive and open way, because we want lots of startups and SMEs and other organizations to be able to join in with these supply chains. Hence, we feel that we have to build some really important tools. The first one mentioned here is the materials platform. If you can change the slide, Sharon, we will be giving people a chance to access materials as designers. Oh, those materials are available. And Miriam has already mentioned, I think, or maybe it was Bruno, sorry, that it can take 20 years for a new material to be recognized and understood by designers and consumers. And we want to get that down to 3 and 4 years, or even faster if possible. Biology is different to technical materials. Hence, the famous Ellen MacArthur butterfly has 2 wings. And it is both an advantage that biological materials degrade of themselves and a disadvantage. It means that if you leave it alone for long enough, it sort of disappears as a problem, potentially. And that means that the new supply chain has to be very different, because it's built on some of those, what we might suggest are lazy assumptions. How do you know who the supply chain partners are? We are the worst dressed people in the room of fashionable people. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So just to finish, Yvonne Castle is our centre manager who commences work with us on Monday next week. That's her email or contact, or we have a general TCC email. So look forward to discussing more later on.
Hi, I'm Julia Stegman, and I've just tried to share my screen. Is everybody able to see it?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I'm a professor of environmental engineering at UCL, and I've always worked in the intersection between industrial waste and building materials. And the center that I'm presenting has a rather long name of UKRI Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Centre for Mineral-Based Construction Materials. And that arose because of early interdisciplinary discussions where we discovered that construction minerals are different things in different people's minds. So we came up with this as what seemed to us the clearest title at the time, but I think I'm going to regret it over the next 4 years. So I'd like to introduce my co-directors for the centre, Leon Black from the University of Leeds and Mohammed Osmani, who are also on the call today, and Lisa Hanselman, our program manager or project manager, who just joined us yesterday. And we have a number of other host organizations. There's the University of Leeds, the Loughborough University, University of Sheffield, Lancaster University, Imperial College London, and the British Geological Survey. So why construction minerals? Construction is one of the top 3 sectors of the UK economy, as I think probably most people are aware, and it's responsible for 8% of GDP and 10% of employment, as well as 10% of greenhouse gas emissions and 60% of waste generation. In the UK, we get through 500,000 tons a day of mineral-based construction materials, and globally, that's around 55 gigatons in 2020. And the figure here that I've taken from an excellent paper by Krausman just shows the escalation in our use of those materials over time. and where if you see everything from the orange color up is in fact mineral-based construction materials. So it's colossal amounts of material associated with very significant impacts. So the aim of our center is basically to do everything we can to support the transition to a circular, sustainable economy for mineral-based construction materials with a specific focus on built environment infrastructure. So that includes roads, railways, harbors, ports, waterways, flood defenses, airports, energy, water, sewage, etc. And we've chosen that emphasis because the UK is due to make an investment of something like £600 billion over the next 10 years in that area. And so mineral-based construction materials not include the building products that we're familiar with, so cement and brick and so on, and also the natural materials that go into making them, and the anthropogenic resources that could go into them through industrial symbiosis. To some extent, they already do. So things like ashes and slags and materials from excavation and dredging. So this is our system diagram. And so going down the center, you see the linear life cycle, and going all the way from resource extraction to processing, manufacture, construction, the service life, end of service with followed by collection and treatment. And in a circular economy, all of the wastes and byproducts that arise from each of those stages go through to treatment and are recirculated back to the appropriate stage where they can be used at highest value. And so our center focuses around 3 challenges related to that diagram. So challenge 1 is on material flows, stocks, and impacts, which is the arrows and the green boxes representing stocks in the previous diagram. Challenge 2 is on technical understanding and technological innovation across the life cycle. So those are the blue boxes in the previous diagram. And challenge 3 is really the whole system, systemic enablers for circularity. And so that's everything inside the system diagram. So now I'm going to say a few words about challenge 1, just to describe a bit more what it's about and what we're doing, and then Leon and Mohammed are going to say something about challenges 2 and 3. So the research questions really in challenge 1 are: what are the material flows and stocks of importance? Where are they? What are their quantities? What are their characteristics of importance for a circular economy? And what are their economic, social, and environmental impacts? And how do these aspects change over time, and specifically in response to interventions that you might make to stimulate a circular economy? So we're addressing those research questions through 5 focus areas. Firstly, material flow analysis. Secondly, looking at data needs. Third, at the environmental impact and risk characterization. Then we have a focus area on life cycle assessment, and lastly on economic impact modeling. And so if these are these blobs represent the 5 focus areas and the fact that they intersect, we have these 5 postdoctoral projects that are focusing on specific aspects within those focus areas. And each of the postdoctoral projects will run for 22 months, followed by a year in industry. So for challenge 1, we've only got the postdocs are recruited in two cohorts, starting at the beginning of the project and then again in July 2022. So for this period, we've recruited Jinyang Wang, who I'm not sure if he's on the call or not, but I'm sure will be interested to communicate with anybody who's interested in his project. And he's looking at developing a material flow analysis model with aggregates as a case study. And then in the second half of the project, we'll have these other postdocs related to the other focus areas, looking at cascading of materials to soil, the kind of information that we need to establish the use potential for mineral-based construction materials that arise as wastes, life cycle assessment, and the economic modeling. But the fly-in things in red are just a few of the other things that we could look at in these focus areas. And we're looking to get work going in those areas through proposals amongst ourselves and hopefully also jointly with others, and things like PhD and master's projects. So I'm now going to hand over to Leon, who can talk about challenge 2.
Okay, so morning everyone. As Julia's already said, so challenge 2 is looking at technical understanding and innovation. So looking at it very much from a civil engineering and a material science perspective. And what we've tried to do with this work package, again, using the approach of having 5 projects under this theme, is to try and span the entire typical lifespan of a piece of infrastructure. So starting with design, then looking at the materials that go into construction, so developing new cements, looking at new construction processes, and for example, how additive manufacturing may, or how we can encourage circularity while using additive manufacturing, so 3D printing. Then looking, saying, well, actually, can we just extend the lifetime of infrastructure? Can we design concrete that allows us to, well, gives us better performance and longer lifetimes? And then ultimately, because everything comes to an end, what do we do at end of life? How can we take concrete or take a concrete structure, and rather than just using a wrecking ball, getting a lot of rubble, and then turning around and saying, oh, we need to improve drainage in a construction site, which is an alternative way of saying we need to throw our rubble on the ground and build on top of it, which is the common approach. We're saying, well, how can we reuse that material? And so if you go to the next slide, please, Julia. So like I said, there's five projects. First one, Shoma Kitayama. I don't know if he's on the call, but he's already in place, looking at design of circular gypsum panels, so reusing, how do you the design process to reuse materials. Theo Hanine is on the call at the University of Sheffield, has started looking at making alternative Portland cements. The next 2 projects looking at additive manufacturing and improving the performance of concrete at Loughborough and Leeds respectively start next year. And starting at some point soon, because the position hasn't been filled yet, we're looking at maximizing circularity of end-of-life concrete. There is, I should say, much of an emphasis on concrete in this work, in this technical challenge. 2 reasons. First of all, we use more concrete than any other construction material. And secondly, it's also a material that probably offers the greatest potential for change, which is a euphemistic way of saying at the moment we just crush it at end of life and don't do anything. It's in very, very little circularity within concrete construction, offers us the potential to make a difference if we can come up with some solutions to it. That's it from me. So it's on to Mohammed for challenge 3.
Thank you, Leon. Good morning, everyone. So challenge 3, the aim of challenge 3 is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy in the mineral construction material sector via the creation of framework for proposing changes at 2 levels. First, changes to business practices in the mineral construction material sector by removing barriers and creating market support. And the second level is changes to policy and regulation to support these circular economy business practices. So the two-level changes of Challenge 3 is reflected in the structure and the content of the 5 project of Challenge 3, which is illustrated in diagram on the right-hand side. So the first level of change of the business practice is inside the dotted square, where we have 4 focus areas centered around the first project, the PDRA project, postdoctoral project, circular economy business models, and there are 3 interrelated projects, eco-design, and then value ecosystems and capital investment. If we start with the first one, which is the center, which is the circular economy business models. So the aim of that project is to identify opportunities, barriers, and key circularity indicators that inform the creation of circular economy business models for material construction minerals. And the project will start in summer 2022, part of the second cohort. And then project 3B, postdoctoral project 3B, the aim is to develop criteria for the characterization of mineral construction materials and validate this criteria in case studies. And then Evie Manola, the postdoc of this project, has already started working on this project. And then after that, we have project PDRA 3C, and that will start in summer 2022. The project here relates to the sector, the sectoral and organizational behavior change. And the aim of this project is to identify factors affecting specified decision-making behavior and influence this through a value-driven market platform in the form of a digital information system. Excuse me. And the PDR 3D, looking at enabling capital investment. So the aim of this project is to understand the key metrics which are used for internal and external investment decisions, and the proposed an accounting sustainability hybrid tool which will enable the circularity of mineral construction materials. And then the project, the postdoctoral researcher is Longshan Zhao, who started again a few weeks ago. And then finally, the second part that changes in terms of policy is through project 3E, and the aim is to identify new regulatory approaches and policies and instruments to support and promote the circularity of mineral construction materials, which is really a cross-cutting theme across all the 15 projects of the center. And finally, the identified opportunity in all the 5 projects of Challenge 3 in terms of system changes will feed back to the scenario modelings of Challenge 1, and the identified opportunity for the technical innovation of the project in Challenge 3 will feed back to the technical understanding of each life cycle stage of the mineral construction materials in Challenge 2. And that's all for me. Julia, back to you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I see Peter has made himself visible, which suggests to me that we're running short of time. I do have a couple of more slides where I just want to be able to acknowledge the other members of the team, because it's not just me and Leon and Mohammed. We in fact have 22 other co-investigators, and this slide just really tries to show the interdisciplinarity of those, with the disciplines at the top, and the fact that many of the investigators are involved in multiple projects. And we've also got 37 industrial stakeholders, including national, global, and SMEs, many of whom are also involved in, or most of whom are involved in more than one project. And then very importantly, we also have an independent advisory board where we have representatives for 16 different themes that recur across the circular economy, and we'll be verifying that we're addressing those in all of the work that we do. Yeah, I think I've said everything that I critically need to say about this. We do have an email address, so if you would like further information or to communicate about anything, please do get in touch.
Hi everyone, my name is Jin Xuan. I'm a professor in Chemical Engineering Department in Loughborough University and also leading the Center for Circular Chemical Economy. So today I'm gonna do the presentation for my own, but all our theme leaders are also here in the meeting. I think they will be also happy to join in the Q&A and join in the discussion. So as you can see, the center is a collaboration among 7 universities, led by Loughborough, but also involves Sheffield, Hereward, Cardiff, Newcastle, Imperial College, and Liverpool. So just start with a bit context on the chemical industry. So the chemical industry is quite important to the UK's economy. It has, in terms of value of money, it has 32 billion pounds of annual turnover. And it is largest export sector in the UK, actually, if we combine chemical with pharmaceutical sectors. And we all know that our demand in chemicals and the materials will be increased or will be doubled in the next 10 years. And definitely it won't happen without a circular economy approach. The chemical industry no longer has option like of business as usual. It faces several serious issues, like it consumes a lot of petrochemical feedstocks. So 60% of the primary petrochemical consumption goes into the chemical industry. And if we want to decarbonize or defossilize the whole industry, then we need to move away from the petrochemical feedstocks. And it is also the second largest carbon dioxide emitters among all the UK's industry. And if we want to achieve our net zero target, definitely we cannot do that anymore. And it also related to the waste problems, like it generates a lot of landfill waste, because one of the main products of the chemical industry is a plastic. We've been talking about plastic waste for many, many years. One interesting number is that if we keep the same rate of waste generation, the landfill capacity in England will be consumed within 6 years. So all this has motivated us together with the chemical industry to pursue a circular economy that will transform the UK's chemical industry's currently linear supply chain model into a fossil independent, climate positive, and environmentally friendly circular economy. One of the key features or problem of the chemical industry is its product is so diverse. So we have almost 100,000 chemical products and materials are marketed every day. So it's nearly impossible for a center to look at all these production routes. We also find that although the products are diverse, it's almost rely on some single circular resources flows like olefins. So olefins and their complementary feedstocks are the chemical version of the Lego. They, in a different combinations, will make those 300,000 products. So if we can make the resources flow of olefin to be circular, and then there's a large potential of making all the chemical industry to be more circular. So this is our approach. So our vision will be achieved by creating a novel circular resources flow of olefin and their complementary feedstocks, which is of overwhelming importance to the chemical industry, accounting for more than 70% of all organic chemical productions. And we have designed several routes actually to convert different type of waste from the CO2 emissions to the chemical waste and also biological waste back into olefins through different routes like biological, electrochemical, and the chemical recycling routes. I mean, there's a lot of ongoing efforts on, for example, making plastic products more circular. This will be also an important part, but this has been widely studied and well-funded by other projects. So our approach is complementary to those well-established efforts and try to fill the missing part in the whole circular economy big picture. So this is our team. So as I said, we have gathered a team of academics from 7 institutions. Most of us are chemists or chemical engineers because we are solving essentially chemical sector or chemical industry problems, but we are very multidisciplinary in mind. All of our chemical engineers or scientists have knowledges in, for example, whole system modeling, policy, social impact, social justice, etc. And we also collaborate with social scientists, especially in Harry-Wood, Bin and Umed. So they will collaborate with us also to look at the wider social or non-technical barriers. On the right-hand side are the initial partners of our center. So ranging from those multinationals, key players in the chemical sector, such as Unilever, Shell, I just name a few, but to the local SMEs who are providing technologies or play a role in different part of the supply chain. And also those like third sectors like Scottish Enterprise, Zero Waste Scotland, WAP. So we will form those very diverse partnership to really build the ecosystem that are needed to deliver the circular chemical economy. And we also had our first industrial event workshop held, I think, back to 1 month in March. From there, we have gathered further industrial insights, and we will try to publish a report on that. So in the next few slides, I just want to have a quickly go through what we're gonna do in terms of the research. So this center has, I mean, in terms of a research program, we have divided into 3 research themes. So the first theme is to develop new enabling technologies. So we recognize there's no like one-size-fits-for-all approach, and we need to look at various new technologies to recover chemical feedstocks from end-of-life materials. So we will look at, for example, those very close to the market, but probably need a bit improvement and better integration into the current infrastructure, like biological or thermal routes, trying to convert different type of waste and the biomass into those chemical version of Legos like alkanes or olefins. And we also look at some relatively new technology, for example, electrochemical routes, trying to convert CO2 directly or either indirectly to olefins. And also to look at those technologies really at the very low TRL level, like the hydrogenolysis, trying to convert waste polymers to alkanes, to those mid-range hydrocarbon alkanes. And once this technology is developed, we need to integrate them into a wider whole system. So that's where the theme 2 comes in. So we need to develop a whole system approach to advance knowledge on the evolving chemical value chains on their entire life cycle, instead of just looking at single points. So what we will do is to do the process integration, trying to integrate the new processes into the current infrastructure or any new infrastructure, but also trying to integrate the chemical sectors or chemical process as a whole into the wider industrial clusters, trying to achieve industrial symbiosis so that we can share or reuse the materials, resources, or the infrastructures. And we definitely will need to look at LCA as a life cycle assessment on the environment. And also we want to look at the social justice side. So we're not just looking at the environment, but we will perform a so-called social LCA to look at the life cycle social impact of any new technology or circular solution that will, the impact that will generate it to the society. And the third theme is on the policy, society, and the finance, because these are all quite complex non-technical barriers around the business motivation, finance gap, policy awareness, and the policy incentive. All these issues need to be resolved. So for example, we look at the business model, public acceptance, and policy engagement side of the theme. I think I still have some time, so I will go into each of theme in a little bit more details. For example, in the first theme, enabling technologies, we will develop 3 types of routes, conversion routes that we identify initially when we shape the proposal. But I would say they are not exclusive. So we are working with industrial partners, trying to understand the evolving needs or demand from the industrial side, and we are very flexible in incorporating any new technology development that are fit for the future needs of the chemical industry or wider circular economy societies. But up to now, we focus on 3 of them. The first is the electrochemical route. So the electrochemical route has a benefit of using the renewable energy, for example, solar or wind, to directly drive any chemical conversion processes. So it's a potential route for cleaner production or manufacturing of different chemical products or materials. Here we focus on olefin. And the electrochemical routes can be done either directly or indirectly. So we can go either through the syngas route, using CO2 to produce syngas and feed the syngas into a number of existing processes to produce a number of value-added products. Or we will develop something new that it can directly convert CO2 into olefins. So there are a little bit scientific challenges to solve, particularly on the catalyst development and also reactor optimization. Forgot to say, sorry, this will be in a collaboration between Liverpool and Loughborough. And we also look at some solutions that are very close to the market, for example, the thermochemical and the biological transformation. So this will be done by Dr. John Wagner here at Loughborough University. So we will look at a solution that can transform or process the mixture of waste from chemicals and the biological residues through the so-called co-liquefaction process to generate aqueous phase and also the bio-oil phase. And those 2 side streams can be further processed to generate different value-added chemicals that can achieve better circularity of the resources flow. Okay, and then we also look at chemical transformation. So trying to convert the polymer waste, not necessarily go into the very breakdown version of the CO2, hydrogen, and water, but probably to more mid-range hydrocarbons that can be easily recombined to form different type of products. So this can be done through the so-called hydrogenolysis, and it's a very new technology at the lab scale. So we need to a joint efforts from Liverpool and Cardiff, one on the experimental side, but another on the modeling side, trying to develop better catalysts to drive or enable these processes. Okay, so the theme 2 is on the process integration and the whole system optimization. This actually links the technology development and the finance, society, and the policy side. And we will adopt detailed process modeling, techno-economics to look at the economic viability, but also environmental and the social LCA through a whole system optimization. Here are some work plans. I will just quickly go through, but it's just want to say it's a collaboration between Imperial, Loughborough, and Sheffield and Hereward. And finally goes to theme 3. So we want to address policy, society, and finance, trying to answer a few questions. For example, on the whole system approach, what are the challenges to circularity in chemicals? So we kind of gained some industrial perspective through the workshop we had on March, but this is continuing dialogue between us and the industrial partners. And also trying to look at the business models and produce some case studies, hopefully by end of the year or early next year. Finance side, trying to answer the question, what are the financial investment strategies? Who is financial what, etc. Society, we will look at how we can shape the public questionnaires, trying to better understand the public perceptions. Okay, and the policy. So definitely we need to get the industrial perspective, but also to understand what are the policy or interventions are needed to drive the circular economy. All right, so I think that's all for me. Thank you very much. I hope it doesn't overrun time.
Right, thank you very much. And hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here and hear the talks from all the different centres. And this one now is Met4Tech. So this is our UKRI Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Centre for Technology Metals. And these specialist metals then that we use in all our clean and digital technologies are something in which the UK is pretty much close to 100% import reliant. But we have really world-leading expertise here in R&D and the technologies and the companies here working in this area. So some of these are actually quite new flows as we go towards manufacturing electric vehicles and deploying wind turbines and many of the other clean and digital tech. They are mostly at the moment very linear flows. And so we have both a challenge and an opportunity, because as these new flows come in, this is what we would like to do in this centre, is really work out how we can create a really good circular economy in these technology metals. So here's the famous MacArthur butterfly diagram. We're very much on the right-hand side. I would say very much in a linear economy at the moment, with a need for new flows to come in and a tremendous opportunity to make some impact in defining what the new metals, technology metals, circular economy should look like. So this is our centre then, so same as everybody else in terms of funding, very similar to everybody else. We've got 5 academic partners, so you can see our logos in Manchester, Birmingham, Leicester, British Geological Survey, and the Business School and Camborne School of Mines at Exeter University. And the technology metals then are things like cobalt and lithium and rare earths and indium and platinum and group really specialist metals that I'll introduce to you a little bit more on the next slide. And our centre is divided up. We have themes is our piece of jargon, and we're divided into 4 themes. And these are pretty much all interdisciplinary themes. So we've tried to put co-leaders and interdisciplinary research into each of the areas that we'll work on. And you can see some of the keywords there on this slide. Like everybody else, we're working with postdoctoral researchers, and we're planning to have PhDs running alongside the work as well. We have 3 project staff, Carol and Alexandra, with us today, and 1 more to recruit because there's a lot of interest, especially from the policy point of view at the moment in this area. So here we are then. This is the group so far as of a few weeks ago. And so we have a nice diverse group of people, too many to name. So I apologize for the people I don't give a name check in a minute as I run through this talk. But of course, we've all got the rather drier version of our projects on the web. And so if you want to see who any of us are before we've got our website up and running, then you can go here. And of course, we also have our official project partners at the beginning of the project named here too, if you want to see who we're working with. And we have about 40 different partners across the centre who are embedded in the different themes that we're doing and working closely with us in a whole multiple set of different ways. So this is our flow then. We've called it technology metals. We could have called it critical metals, but we chose technology because I think one of the aims of this centre is to move some of these specialist metals away from that critical designation. And I'll show you the map of what that designation means in a second. So why are we interested in these metals? And it's because they're used in the manufacture of so many different things across all of the digital technologies that we're using. So I put a smartphone there right at the top. And if you think of what goes into a smartphone, then that's pretty much every other thing that we use these days has some kind of chip and digital interface and screen with it. So that's pretty much everything straight away. And then the big headlines at the moment are, of course, the use in the energy transition technologies that we need. So when we talk about the UK's net zero ambitions, for some of the flows that we're talking about in the programme, it's really how can we reduce the environmental burden of these flows? And in the tech metals side, then it's how can we secure the supply of these metals in order that we can build the things that we need to generate renewable energy and reduce our carbon footprint. So there's a slightly different way of looking at it with this flow as well. And if you've been reading the table, you'll see some of the correlation between the different elements and what they're used for. And we will work in the centre. We don't have enough person power to do everything for all of these metals. And so we have some flexibility about what we do, but pretty much starting on rare earths, lithium and cobalt, because they keep grabbing the headlines, but also looking at tin tungsten with lithium in southwest England, because that's one of our case studies. Okay, so technology metals then versus other metals. I notice Peter very politely calls us technology metals, and then he talks about big metals, which is the centre you'll hear about in a minute. So we have big metals, and then we have, if you like, little metals, are technology metals. And so why are they important then? Because mining them itself isn't the big environmental burden. As I said, they're facilitators to the energy transition. And on this slide, which was the closest one I had to hand when I made the talk, this is what was produced in 2019, the primary production here. And if you look at the units, something like indium, that isn't a mistake. It's really 760 tons in the whole world mined, and rare earths just hundreds of thousands of tons. And even if we need to multiply by 5, which we do, next year's things like lithium, they're still going to be orders of magnitude less than the amount that we use of the big metals. So a real contrast there. I think that's why we have two centres, because these are really different flows and really different ways of thinking and looking about them, although we'll certainly have some synergies and overlaps that we can do during the lifetime of the centres. And because there's not very much needs to be mined, it's often that 1 or 2 countries will dominate supply. That makes these very important metals then subject to potential supply disruptions. And that's where this term critical comes from. And it's because if we want gigafactories, if we want the wind turbines and so on, we need to have secure supplies of these raw materials. And there are certain countries that dominate. And if you look on the right of this European Union critical raw materials graph, you'll see the lead that China has in so many raw materials. And that means that this is very much a geopolitical issue, which is high on the agenda at the moment. And that's what leads to this security of supply. And that's what leads very quickly in discussions of security supply, not only going out and finding more deposits, but of course creating a circular economy so that we prolong the life properly and capture these metals at the end of life. So let me run through our themes then. So we have thematic area 1, and this is our observatory, if you like, our materials flows analysis, and alongside that our interdisciplinary work into the environmental burdens and the social science of use and manufacture of these metals. And we have co-leads from 2 disciplines in each of our themes, and it's Evi Petterazzi and Marcus Seals who are both here today who lead this theme. And we're just getting going with that, as we already discussed today, with a design sprint coming up in May, and we will be creating a national virtual observatory and bringing the British Geological Survey into looking at whole life flows using their expertise from the raw materials work that they've done for so many years. Thematic Area 2, our lead Karen Hudson-Edwards at Camborne School of Mines, and Bob Lee and Alex Kowalski, who are regulatory experts, lawyers at Birmingham. We will be doing a number of case studies here to look at the circular economy principles applied to mining and raw materials. And the first place we're working is Cornwall. And you see on this cartoon, we're putting together the potential of the half a dozen exploration projects for technology metals that are live in Cornwall at the moment, thinking about the mine waste that's already there, how it interfaces with renewable energy and geothermal power. Should we be recycling so that we're producing secondary and primary raw materials together? And this will be our Cornwall case study, working with regulation and life cycle assessment to have a look at what the industrial ecosystem in Cornwall might be and could be in the future. We're likely to go abroad because this is a very international topic, and look at cobalt deposits as one of our other case studies, looking at large and small scale mining in DRC. And then we have some PhDs looking at how you create circular concepts on a rare earth mine in Malawi, and maximizing the value of tellurium, bismuth and tungsten products from gold mining at the University of Leicester. In Thematic Area 3, this is our unashamedly techie theme with Andy Abbott and Alan Walton, who I don't think are here today, but I think Andrew Dove's here from Birmingham. And we're looking here at what interventions can we make in order to improve the end-of-life recycling. So with these new products and materials, we have some opportunities to get much better here. And this builds on some of the work done in the applied research projects such as the Faraday Battery Challenge, and we've chosen some specific interventions that have been thrown up by those projects. So instead of going to pyrometallurgy and just kind of giving up and putting the whole thing into a smelter to regain the metals, we're looking at some much cleverer chemical techniques such as fast delamination techniques. How can we use changes in physical properties to selectively pick things out? And we've got the robotics team at Birmingham thinking about disassembly. Can we develop selective etchants or debondable adhesives? And their projects will be done at Leicester and Birmingham universities to really look at how we manufacture and design for recycling. And number 4 is where we bring together the other themes, and we'll be using an agent-based model approach to try and balance up all the different factors together with some more social science. And this is where our citizen science will sit. We'll be doing some work around museums led by Frank Bones. Frank is here today. Josh isn't, unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, but we'll be working very much with our industry partners. And the aim is by the end of year 4, we have a roadmap, but that roadmap is already made, picking up the business opportunities with our partners. And so we have a number of partners already traveling on the road, as well as the policy recommendations for government. And we're already engaged with government just because of the hot topic of the critical raw materials at the moment. So we're already working on some of that policy, but we should have some real good science-based policy to suggest by the end of our time. So just to put that together again in a summary. So if you want to think of this project very easily, think of Thematic Area 1 and 4. This is our interdisciplinary work going through looking at the stocks, flows and practices, and then producing the technology metals CE roadmap with 2 distinct interventions around the manufacturing and chemistry for recycling and that raw materials views using circular economy approaches. And all of this will be done in collaboration with stakeholders. And of course, that's already our project partners embedded in the project. And we've been making new and further collaborations with partners overseas. And of course, we're really enthusiastic to make collaborations with the other centres in the programme as well. And we've been doing that through the hub course already. And I hope today is going to lead to more connections and ideas for the future of our programme. And you can see the email there, metfortech@exeter.ac.uk. Thank you, Peter.
Good afternoon, everybody. I tend to see good afternoon comrades of circular economy. And so we are the team doing circular economy here. My name is Fan, and they all call me Fan anyway. I'm from BCAS at Brunel University, and I'm leading the circular metal program and as part of the CE Hub. And we're collaborating with UCL, University College London, and Warwick University. And the 3 universities will come together, formulate this program here. And today I'm going to give you a brief introduction, but I try to take an approach which is more controversial. So I try to be more taking extreme views and approach to provoke more discussion and debate. Okay. What we've got here is that we have a dissipation overconsumption situation here. And showing here is the resource consumption over the last 100 years or so. And here you also see here is the GDP growth and the population growth here. You can see mainly the economic growth is fueled by resource consumption. And one very shocking fact here is trying to illustrate, see, in the last 70 years, and we have consumed natural resource. The total of resource consumption is more than the cumulative resource consumption is whole human history. And that's a very good point to ask questions. See, why we are doing this? Okay, do we have any consideration for our future generations? The other one, do we have the right to do so compared with our ancestors? They have not done this, why we are doing this? And it's a very good question to ask. As a consequence of overconsumption, and we have a problem, which is unsustainability. And the unsustainability comes from the linear flow of resources. And our economic activities take resources from nature, from Earth, and put it in the economic system. And after usage, most of them becoming waste, and the waste deposited back into nature or Earth. So you can see with this linear flow of resource and the natural system, and that's why a homeland is shrinking, and as a condition for sustaining life becoming more and more difficult. So at the same time, the economic activities as a subsystem is growing. So there's the head-on collision between the shrinking nature, this parent system, and the growing economic system, which is a subsystem. This is our situation we are living now, the world of unsustainability. If you think about it, why we have been doing this, overconsumption and consuming natural resource regardless. And there's a philosophy here that I'm just showing here. Is that the Indian guy is an Indian Hindu monk. What he said, very famously said, man is born to conquer nature and not to follow it. And I'm not saying it is a clever guy. I'm not going to blame him for this because he just said it. And all of us has been doing that all the time, including all our ancestors. So linear economy, which refers to a linear philosophy, and which is about conquering nature. And there, because we human beings believe we are the master of the universe, master of nature. So we can conquer nature. And linear economy is not only economy, it's a linear way of thinking, linear way of life, and a linear science technology. That's what most of researchers doing. If you think about it, what you have been doing research, how much your approach, your way of doing research is linear. And I tend to say linearity is all around us, it's everywhere. And following the Internet of Things, I tend to say, okay, we call this linearity of things, lots. Now I'm going to use an example I'm very familiar with to illustrate what's a linear technology, a linear way of thinking here. And I am steel making, and happens to be my first degree. I was learning eye making and steel making here. And the process is very famous, changed the urban life, particularly since the Industrial Revolution, which have done so much contribution to our economic growth, and which might be called the #1 technology which has changed the world. Okay? But this process here, look at it. I said I'm going to be very controversial to say, okay, this might be the world's most stupid technology ever. Okay, you can see from you take mining, you got an iron ore, you process the iron ore, and you put it into a blast furnace here, and this is a wonderful technology. Everybody believes very close or very efficient, and you put the iron ore in and mix it with carbon with other minerals, and then eventually get you get a liquid iron coming out. Because you use carbon to reduce iron oxide, the liquid iron you got is saturated with carbon, a few percent. And liquid iron or solid iron with 3% iron, called pig iron, is not very, very useful. So that's why steel making has to be doing has to be take place here to reduce the iron contents is liquid iron. And so what are you going to do? Use oxygen. You blow oxygen in, oxidize the carbon, and then oxidizing carbon is down, but oxygen is up, and then you deoxidize. And deoxidation, you cause inclusions, which are like alumina and magnesium oxide and all this. They are very, very small particles, solid particles, nanoscale. They're very difficult to get rid of it. But if you have this, and it's a steel performance, it's not going to be that good. So people tried very hard through a refining process to get rid of these inclusions. And I was learning some time ago of steel making refining. Okay, there are over 100 different techniques to refine liquid metal to get higher quality. You can see how difficult. Basically, iron making is easy, steel making more difficult, and refining even more difficult. But the point I'm making here is you can see this is a typical linear process. One job done creates a problem for next group of people to do it. So if you go to iron steel company, you see their production site is normally a few kilometers size. Okay, that's why. And I'm just joking to see, okay, the iron steel making community, they are very, very good to create jobs for each other. Circular economy. Circular economy is growing very fast around the world in the last 10 years or so, particularly last 5 years, and which basically provide a potential solution to our unsustainability problem here. Okay, so circular economy, I'm not going to see how we define circular economy, and later on I'll come back to this point. Current stage, circular economy cannot be defined, and because we just started so much space there to develop. The objective of circular economy is very clear. It's radically limit or eliminate extraction of raw materials and production of reduction or elimination of production of waste. Yeah. Now, we come back to the earlier, we just see what's circular economy. As I said earlier, it's difficult to define, particularly at this stage, okay? But we do understand circular economy is not only about economy, it's way beyond the economy itself. And almost everything around us, which can be linked with circular economy, or we call this circularity of things here. First, circular economy is a philosophy, and I will see circular economy defines our relationship with nature. As we said earlier, cannot be masters of nature. We can only be friends of nature. So we need to live in harmony with nature. And economy is economy. We need to, our economic activities need to be bounded by nature's ability to regenerate. So it's a regenerative economy. Research-wise, and I found this very interesting. And whatever research you're doing, it just asks simple or mechanical question: is what we have been doing is linear or secular? And which will provide you with lots of new ways or new insight with what you're doing here. And circular economy is linked definitely with the government here. And earlier, Peter was asking questions, someone was asking question, what's the biggest challenge of circular economy? And at least I said, one of the biggest challenges is the government. Okay? We need a strong government to believe in circular economy, and the strong governments need to balance the free market forces here. Free market economy with a tendency to generate profits, okay, maximize profits, which somehow fitting the opposite side of circular economy. And manufacturing and products need to be designed for long life, high quality, and use less materials. And more importantly here, we see society. I would say if the whole society, if everybody, the public, everybody can change mind overnight, we are going to circular economy. We don't need to do so much research. Everything would be much easier to do the transition to circular economy. Of course, to finish future generations, and which means a better planet than what we're having now. Very quickly, let's see, okay, before I introduce our program, let's see 5 principles of circular economy. We already said live in harmony with nature is one of them. And waste equals food, which means about circular flow of materials and products. One here, I would just remember here, resilience through diversity, which very much learned from the biological source there. And the system, if we have more components, they were more resilient to challenges, to other things. Renewable energy and seeking systems, that's the 5 things. And then based on this, I'm going to speed up and let's see, okay, we got our overall vision is circular full metal circulation. We don't need to do extraction anymore, no more mining. We go for just use what we have. And I tell you, it's much more than enough. If we develop further with more high performance alloys and materials, and we even use much less, okay? And so in our program, we use, basically we see 5 technology enablers and 5 social economic facilitators. So we mix science technology with social science, with economics, with all this business, with these areas. So with this intertwined approach, we have developed our program here. And our program, of course, everything circular, we're aiming to circular, from circular materials, circular alloys, circular technology, circular macroeconomics, and circular pricing, and circular society. Circular supply chain, circular business models, all this with the aim to slow down the materials flow and narrow the flow, and of course, eventually close the flow here. That's our approach here with the different things here. And now I'll very quickly use a 3 examples to demonstrate what we're doing here. And the first one, circular alloy here. And all the metallic materials you have been utilizing in whatever the devices you are using, they are alloys, they're not pure metals. So we take one example, we just see aluminum. We purify aluminum, we put some elements in to make it stronger. And all this mechanism to make it stronger is also linear traditional here. And they are difficult to recycle and designed for single use. So we are trying to develop alloys and with very small numbers. And they all high performance, and more importantly, they're very resilient to change, for example, composition change or condition change. So they can be repeatedly recycled. And we have very good basis for this, where we started this program here. Circular technology, and very quickly, I'll still run out of time to see human being. We work for a while, we get tired, and metals have a similar character here, and metals does fatigue, okay? So we're trying to develop a global health service for metallic components, okay? So the component can be looked after and prevention of fatigue. And if you do get fatigued, we can recover. And if you get diseased or some minor damage, we can go to the clinic. And similarly, if they get severe damage, but still we have hospital for them to be completely recovered, okay? With this approach, we can learn a lot from the National Health Service medical system there, and we can do a lot. So basically, this is a huge field to work on. And the consequence of this is one component will be lasting for a long, long time. We are not talking 20%, 50%. We're talking about orders of much longer life, okay? Circular pricing, and just as example, see gold, very expensive, 40,000 per kilo, and potato costs £5 per kilo, and aluminum £2, okay? And it's current price. And why this, but aluminum costs 12 kilograms CO2, 14 kilowatts hour electricity, and very little price. And with this circular pricing, okay, this should be something like aluminum should cost a lot more, and gold should cost much less, because gold does not have CO2 as a resource problem here. So that's my final slide. And just see, okay, we have made a start, and it's the beginning of the start. So we cannot do everything. We have a program, and we very much welcome everybody come on board to join the team to push things forward. Thank you.